Bonjour tout le monde, welcome back to We in France. Today I want to start with a story that I don't think I've ever shared here before. Now, several years ago, well before I moved to France, an older, more well-traveled friend warned me about the French. I had had plans to go to Paris later that month and she wanted to prepare me, so I listened. Now, at that time, I hadn't yet met Tom. Moving to France wasn't even on my radar and I had very, very limited firsthand knowledge of France. So this friend, she'd been to France many times for her job. She told me about Paris and what the French people were like as a whole, and she was convinced that French men only want to get in your pants, that they'll lie to you, that the French are arrogant, standoffish, and focused only on appearances and are super judgmental. She let it rip. Now, what she said obviously made me really anxious and not super excited to go to France, so much so that I nearly canceled my trip. None of this was positive, and I didn't like what she had to say, quite frankly, and this friend was someone I looked up to, and since she traveled to Paris regularly, what she'd said, it carried weight for me. Now, luckily, I went to Paris as planned with a girlfriend of mine, and we had a blast. My experiences were nothing like this friend. And that's the point I want to dive deeper into here in this video. We all live our own lives and our experiences are not all going to be the same. And that is a beautiful thing. So now if we flash forward to today, I see a lot of content out there on social media that makes it seem like all French people are superficial and judgy. It's nothing new. You've seen it. I know you have. This French girl this, French girl that. It sells, aspire to be like the French, to eat like the French, raise your kids like the French, decorate like the French. Now, I'm also talking about advice that says, you have to come to France and you have to be dressed like this. You have to act like that. Otherwise, the French are going to look down on you and judge you because that's how they are. And I hate that the French are being generalized like this. People and the way we live our lives, it's all nuanced. It's not black and white. There are judgmental people everywhere. For the record, there are French people who are overweight, loud talkers, rude like it's their job, super friendly, not fashionable, people who dress more casually, who don't know the first thing about wine, maybe don't even drink, aren't good cooks, don't like to cook, don't have a lot of money, live in public housing, go to McDonald's. I could go on. And all of these people, these French people, they're perfectly fine. They're enjoying their life as much as the next person, and they're not here to judge you. That's not what it's about, And I also want to make the point here, I'd be remiss if I didn't make this point too, that the exact opposite view of the French can be equally problematic. One where we automatically assume that all French people are kind and welcoming, especially if you start with that obligatory bonjour at the beginning of any interaction that I've talked about at length on this channel. That's not true either. The truth is nuanced. Like I said, it's somewhere in the middle. And people are people. So despite doing everything right, someone might still be rude to us, French or otherwise, and probably has very little to do with us. And when we have this impression that all French people are wonderful and kind, and then someone is super rude, it can make us think that we did something wrong if our experience doesn't match up to what we've heard. Now, as I said, the truth lies in the middle. If you spend enough time in any one place, you're sure to encounter someone who isn't so kind and welcoming. It's just human nature. And I always get a little chuckle when I hear people proclaim that the French are all so kind and wonderful everywhere without leaving room for nuance. Human beings aren't always kind. You catch me on a bad day. We've all had moments we regret, and the French aren't immune to that. You will encounter a rude French person if you spend enough time here. They exist because we're all human. And I feel like I have to mention this because people out there have this uniform impression of the French. People actually think that all French people have inherent food and wine knowledge, maybe are all slim, they all cook their own food fresh from the farmer's market, have perfect wardrobes, well-behaved kids, and that all French people are these classy, upper middle class people. I could go on and on with my list. And how do I know this? Why am I saying this? Well, I've met people in real life who have told me as much time and time again. I see it on my Facebook page, on Instagram. So a personal story: at a family holiday meal, I met a guest for the first time at one of my distant family members' houses. Her name was Jen, we'll call her. She was well into her 60s, well educated and traveled. And we got to talking about France, what I like here, how long I've lived here. And then boom, she was jaw on the floor, shocked, when it came into the conversation that not all French people fall into this classy, stereotypical mold. Almost like she was sad about it, like a kid finding out there's no Santa Claus. And Google Paris syndrome, it's real, and that's why I just told you in another video that in passing, I don't tell people just for fun that I live in France, because people like Jen, she couldn't believe there were homeless people in France and that the French eat fast food. I didn't mean to burst her bubble, but I did clear up some common misconceptions she's believed her whole life. And Jen is not alone in thinking like this. The French are people too. There's nuance. Anyway, there's a lot to say on this. I'm gonna move on. But my point here is that I think it's troublesome when people, especially on social media, act like experts and spread misinformation about the French, especially when it paints them in a bad light, in a kind of all or nothing kind of way, like it's black or white. It's one thing to say, in my experience, I found the French to be judgmental because of this exchange we had in Paris. And we saw a lot of well-dressed people and, explaining based on your experience. And it is another thing entirely to authoritatively state, the French are judgmental, everyone's well-dressed, you better be well-dressed too, or they will judge you. That's not true. There's no room for nuance there. And then we go and wonder why people believe this stuff, like Jan in my story, because we see it time and time again. Just advice that's bogus. And look, I want to be clear about something. It is great to share our experiences. They are different. I encourage that. I do it regularly here on this YouTube channel and on my blog in the hopes that my experience will help you. But you'll notice I really try to not state sweeping generalizations as facts or as the only facts. I try not to paint the French with this one unrealistic brush, and I never say that my experience is the one and only experience to have. I'm not here to convince you to be more like the French. You come, you form your opinion, you do what you want, and if you find my advice helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad I could help you, and we could look at all different points of views and learn. As I always say, I think it's really important to leave room for other points of view and to not be dismissive of people who maybe don't have a great experience, or people who had a great experience and you didn't. As I say, visiting France and the living abroad experience, it's not all one size fits all. And I get really discouraged when I see these popular Instagram accounts tell others about what France is like in absolutes, often after just spending a small amount of time in Paris. I feel it could be really stressful and intimidating for someone who has never been to France, not to mention frustrating to read if you've lived here a decade. But, it's as if the French are here with their imaginary rule books and lists that they whip out to judge tourists. And that's just not true. I was stressed and I was nervous and anxious about coming to France after hearing what my friend said. And I'm sure that happens a lot. Now, last thing, I had a reader email me, and what she said made me incredibly sad. She said she had always wanted to visit Paris, but she's held off for years because she's overweight, and she was told by many people that the French will mock her. And my advice there is throw that out the window, go to Paris, love it. Don't let that nonsense influence you. If your dream has always been to go to Paris, go. Learn as much as you can, be as respectful as you can, but have a great time. Live your life. And if you take anything away from this video, let it be this. The French are not all perfectly cultured, upper middle class unicorns that look down on others. Maybe in some circles, but that's people anywhere. And nor are they all kind and all welcoming. The beauty of it all is that the French come from all different backgrounds, all different shapes and sizes and skin tones, and they aren't all any one way. And it's a beautiful thing to get to know them. And just above all, come to France, enjoy it. All that BS needs to stop because it's certainly not helping tourists. It's not helping anyone. It's just perpetuating outdated stereotypes that we don't need to hear about anymore. And last thing, if you want no-nonsense tips that actually are helpful and will help you to be more prepared for your France trip, I do have an ebook. It's just a few bucks, titled 75 Beginner France Tips for a Standout Trip. It looks like this. I'd love for you to check it out via the link below. And I also adjusted my lighting for those of you who have been around here for a while. Sometimes I have like a really bright set with like a little colored bubble over here of light. I put it behind me to kind of switch it up. I want to experiment for things, see where 2023 takes us. But yeah, let me know if you like the blue. Maybe I'll make it purple or green. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know below if you've ever experienced this, I don't know, overly simplified content about French people that really doesn't paint them in the best light. If you can identify with anything I've said here, or maybe you've been intimidated by the French or France and you put off a trip. I hope that's not the case, but let me just reassure you, France is a great place to visit. On that note, I'll see you back here on We in France soon. Merci, au revoir, salut.